The projects that do not get built do not show up in reports. Cancellations get counted. What does not get counted is the load that was supposed to be served, the emissions that were supposed to come down, and the capacity that was supposed to replace something older and dirtier. That accounting gap is where the real exposure lives. E2, a national business group that tracks clean energy investment, reported in its Q1 2026 analysis that 38 clean energy generation and storage projects totaling nearly 8 gigawatts GW of capacity were canceled in the first quarter alone, representing almost $13 billion in abandoned investment and more than 33,000 jobs that will not be created. That single quarter exceeded more than half of all clean energy capacity lost to cancellations in all of 2025, and the pace is accelerating. E2 reports that cancellations tracked since the beginning of 2025 now exceed the combined total from 2022 through 2024. The cancellation data is visible. What it does not capture is the second-order effect: the buyers, facilities, utilities, and communities that had planned around those projects. Every canceled project has a downstream. Corporate off-takers with signed power purchase agreements, PPAs, face supply gaps. Grid operators may need to identify replacement resources when projects included in planning assumptions fail to reach commercial operation. In some states, project delays and cancellations can make statutory clean energy targets more difficult to achieve on originally anticipated timelines. None of those consequences show up in the cancellation tally. The PPA volume drop is where the future cancellations are already being written. The American Clean Power Association, ACP, reported that PPA announcements fell 27% year over year in 2025, and that the first half of 2025 saw 32% less capacity contracted through PPAs than the first half of 2024. Battery storage PPA announcements were down 88% from Q1 to Q2 2025. Wind announcements dropped 93% over the same period. Those figures are not yet cancellations. They are the absence of the new projects that would have replaced the ones currently being lost. The deployment numbers for 2028 to 2030 are being set right now by contracting activity that is not happening. Bloomberg Nef's 1H 2026 Corporate Energy Market Outlook found that global clean PPA volumes fell for the first time in nearly a decade in 2025, declining 10% from the prior year's record. The market is increasingly defined by a split between hyperscalers, with Meta, Amazon, Google, and Microsoft responsible for 49% of all global corporate clean energy activity in 2025, and the broader universe of corporate buyers who do not have the balance sheet or bargaining power to secure supply under the same terms. ACP and market analysts increasingly describe a market in which procurement opportunities are concentrating among the largest buyers, while smaller buyers face higher prices and fewer available projects. What canceled projects cost beyond the balance sheet? The less visible cost of project cancellations accumulates in three places that sustainability and operations teams are not always tracking together. The first is spot market exposure. Corporate buyers with contracted supply that does not deliver absorb unbudgeted energy costs, sourcing equivalent power from the open market. The second is Scope 2 accounting integrity. For organizations using renewable energy PPAs as the foundation of their emissions reporting, delivery shortfalls can affect the volume of renewable energy attributes available for market-based Scope 2 claims, depending on contract structure and renewable energy certificate REC ownership. Auditors and third-party verifiers are increasingly scrutinizing whether contracted supply is actually delivering, not merely contracted. The third is deferred infrastructure costs. When a new clean energy project does not materialize, the aging plant or peaker it was supposed to retire keeps running. Maryland ratepayers are currently projected to absorb reliability must-run payments to keep the Brandon Shores coal plant operating through at least 2028, in part because interconnection delays prevented the clean energy projects meant to replace it from reaching commercial operation on schedule. The cancellation trend is occurring alongside continued deployment. ACP reported the U.S. added more than 50 gigawatts of utility-scale solar, wind, and storage in 2025. The first-year installations exceeded that threshold. The risk is not that projects are no longer being built. The risk is that future project pipelines are becoming less certain at the same time electricity demand is accelerating. The accountability gap between announcements and outcomes, sustainability reporting, investor disclosures, and corporate decarbonization commitments are largely built on announced projects and contracted supply. The systems that track these commitments have not caught up with a market where the distance between announcement and delivery has grown, and where a meaningful share of announced projects are now being abandoned before they reach the grid. UNTAD's January 2026 Global Investment Trends Monitor noted that the number of new sustainable development projects fell 16% in 2025, while capital concentrated in data centers and semiconductor manufacturing. The aggregate investment figures look healthy. The project count tells a different story. Companies that report clean energy progress through contracted capacity need to understand what share of that capacity is actively progressing toward delivery and what share is sitting in a queue, waiting on a permit, or quietly approaching a financing deadline it may not meet. The canceled projects do not show up in the sustainability report. The gap between what was committed and what was delivered eventually does. You've been listening to Sustainability Soundbites by Environment and Energy Leader. For partnership opportunities, please reach out to our team.